Yep, King P here.
And Steelio7, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. This week we are joined by writer, author, actor, and original Zordon from the Mighty Morphing Power Rangers, David J. Fielding.
Hope you enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to This Week in Metropolis.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis with me, Steelio7, and King P. And today we are joined by the I can't believe we've managed to convince this gentleman to join us today. He's someone who I grew up watching on TV through my childhood years. Matt, you're a little bit older, although I know that you have also
more my teenage years.
Yeah, exactly. But this gentleman is a writer, he's an author, he's an actor, and he is the mentor of the Power Rangers. David Fielding, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
For David, for those who don't know you, and I think I've covered quite a bit there in just a small sentence, but for those that don't know you somehow, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. A little bit about myself. I'm a writer and an author. I used to be an actor. I haven't acted in a long time. Was lucky enough to find myself a part of something that blew up into a pop culture phenomenon, and it has allowed me to interact with and travel across the world to meet people that like the show. It has taken me to places that I didn't think I would ever get to, and anytime that I am given the opportunity to talk about it and to meet people that enjoyed it, I love doing that. So I'm also a little bit opinionated about some things, so hopefully I don't rub anybody the wrong way, but and given the state of the world today, saying something like that out loud can be taken one way or the other, because I come down on one side of the spectrum, and there are a lot of voices on the other side of the spectrum who are screaming about cancel culture and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not part of that. I'm very much about trying to help people and be better people, and so anyway, just that. If that makes a lot of sense. All right.
Well, it does.
I grew up, as I mentioned before, like Mighty Morphing Power Rangers for me, when I was I think I would have been about 7 or 8, maybe a little bit older. And I remember me and my friends being out the front of our houses in the street playing and pretending who was your favourite character and who you were going to be. How did you come about? I mean, me and Matt have done our research and looked into your history and seen some of your other interviews, but how did it come about, you getting the gig as Zordon?
It had a lot to do with luck and timing. Like a lot of other first stories about getting a job in Hollywood, it has a lot to do with networking as well, because I had got my undergraduate acting degree at the Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas, and had made a lot of friends while I was going to school there. And some of those friends moved out to California while I went to the East Coast to the University of Pittsburgh to get my Master of Fine Arts in Acting. And while I finished up that 3-year program, they were busy establishing themselves out in California. So that when I joined them 3 years later, I sort of had a group of friends that I could talk to and hang out with, who could show me the lay of the land and what it was like to live there and so forth and so on. And one of the friends that I had made at Southwest Texas State, a woman by the name of Stacy Fish, was actually working at Saban Entertainment at the time. She was an assistant director on some of their direct-to-video film projects they were working on, and she was also working on the pilot for the show that they were doing at the time called Dino Rangers. And I had just recently moved to Los Angeles. I had been there a couple of months, and Stacy called me one day and said, we're having auditions for this role, for this pilot that we're shooting. Would you like to come down and read for it? And I said, yeah, of course, because that's why I had gone to California, to see if I could make it in film and television, what that whole thing was about. Because all of my training up to that point was for stage acting. I was doing plays and musicals and stuff like that. And so I had gone down to the Saban building, I think it was like in an afternoon, sometime in October, and was expecting to be in a line with like 1,500 other guys. I would go into a room, read a few lines, and then go home and never hear anything ever again, because there are so many pilots being filmed in LA. There are so many auditions that people go on where it's a cattle call of just people reading lines over and over. And in this case, it was completely different. I knew right when I walked in there that something was different, because when I got there, it was just me and another gentleman. And they told us that they were going to make that choice that night. They were going to cast it, and then they were going to film it next week. And they wanted to make sure that we were free on a certain day. And of course, I said yes. Of course, I'll be free. And they gave us the lines to read, and he went off into one corner to practice his lines, and I went into the other corner. And he went in first. He was in there for about 20 minutes, and then he came out and he left, and they brought me in. I met the director, the producers, the studio people, and I met the original cast. They had me stand up on a table so that I was standing above them. And I read the lines, and I remember Austin St. John turning to everybody and goes, well, I think we found our Zoltar. And I went home, and a couple hours later got the official phone call saying, congratulations, you got the part, and here's where you need to show up next week. And the rest is history. So.
What was the brief for the role when you went to the audition? What did it describe in terms of what you were auditioning for?
Well, they told me that I was auditioning for a 10,000-year-old wizard who was trapped in a time warp. that was the only direction I was given. That was the only sort of background information, and that was the only background information for the character for a very, very long time. So there was no history for this guy about how he did things, how he was attached to the morphing grid, anything like that. Because I think these guys, as much thought that they put into putting the show together, I don't really think they thought a lot through about what this character was beyond, somebody who would give the Power Rangers certain information that they might need to get through that week's episode. So it was only much later that they figured out, well, we better start filling in some blanks. Yeah. We're starting to explore a bunch of new territory. And Zordon is very unique in this sort of Sentai type universe, because even today, most of the Power Ranger shows that are on take their storylines and a lot of their footage from the Japanese Sentai counterparts. And Zordon did not have a Sentai counterpart. There was no big bald head in the tube. There was no Eltar or anything like that. The Zoo Ranger show that Power Rangers was based on, they had the character of Barza, who was sort of like this wizard in a cave, this hermit kind of guy that would like guide them and stuff. But he wasn't this sort of overarching mentor type character that Zordon was. So there wasn't a whole lot of background information to sort of like build on, and I don't think there were any sort of plans to bring Zordon outside of the tube. So there wasn't a whole lot of attention being paid to that character, because he was basically just a conduit for information that the Rangers could use to defeat the bad guy and jump up in the air and say, yay us. And so, yeah.
Two things off the back of that. One, you mentioned when you auditioned for it, there was only one other chap there with you at the time going for the same role. One, did that not put you off at all? Did you not think, oh, maybe this isn't going to be? But I mean, obviously it went on to be humongous as a franchise. But
yeah, at the time, I think I just saw it as a great opportunity, because my odds of getting the job were 50%, right? Yeah. And because it was a pilot, because it hadn't been picked up yet, and the chances were that it wasn't going to get picked up, or at least from my perspective, the chances were that it wasn't going to get picked up. I think they knew at the time that Fox was really interested in getting it, but they were keeping that on the down low, so just to sort of like keep people up in the air about stuff. Yeah. But so from my perspective, I wasn't auditioning for a part that would last for 25 years.
Yeah,
I was auditioning for a part that might possibly be a job of some kind.
Yeah.
And like 3 weeks later, when they said, congratulations, the show has been picked up, I got the phone call saying that Fox had wanted to buy the show. It was kind of a bittersweet moment because it was like, oh, great, I've got a job. I'm going to be acting on this thing. And they said, oh, yeah, we're not going to film you anymore. We're just going to bring you in to do voices and stuff. So I kind of knew right from the beginning that my experience on the show was going to be very, very different than the main cast. Because the business model of the series was to make it as fast and as cheap as possible and to reuse every bit of footage that they could so that they didn't have to pay for it over and over and over. Yeah. And that was sort of the magic formula that they captured. They captured lightning in a bottle with that thing, because not only did they have these sort of like 11 minutes of every episode was Japanese footage. They only had to come up with like another 11, 15 minutes of American footage to fill out the half hour plus commercials and then put it on the air. So they were making like half episodes at a time. And I'm sure it was difficult in the writer's room trying to sort of patch quilt that thing together to make sure everything sort of made sense, and how do we work in this wacky purse monster, and all this kind of junk. So from a business production standpoint, it was very smart on their part how they put it together. From an actor performer standpoint, it really sucked because I was a part of a TV show, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was a part of a TV show.
I was just going to say as well, because I think I've seen in another interview that you've done that you mentioned that you've never, like you said, never had to act any scenes with the other cast members. But right. But you mentioning just there when you done your audition and you had to stand up in front of the other cast, that would have been probably one of the only interactions that I'm guessing you had with them.
Yeah, that and the day that we filmed, they were all there when we filmed because they were feeding me the lines and stuff. Right. The first day of the dumpster episode with all the dialogue in the command center, and after that I would just get a phone call saying you need to report to the ADR studio at this time for these episodes, and that would just happen like every 5 or 6 weeks. Other than that, I was busy working other jobs and I wasn't auditioning. I wasn't doing what I had planned to go out to LA to do. And so by the time the show got on the air in the late summer, early fall of 1993, I was burned out and done with LA. I didn't want to be there anymore. And they were still filming the episodes at this point. And I was mentally and emotionally burnt out from living out there. So I said, well, I'm going to leave. And bless his heart, Tony Oliver, the head writer of the show, said, just stick it out for another 6 months. Another 6 months, it's going to be great. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just, I was really afraid I was going to be living under a bridge and that sort of thing. So I made the decision to leave, and they brought me into Haim Saban's office to see if he couldn't convince me to stay. And of course, Haim had no time for anybody who didn't want to be there. And it's not that he didn't care that I was in some kind of distress or something like that. He didn't know me from Adam. He didn't know what character I was or what part I was playing. That didn't matter to him. He says, all right, we get a new voice. Bye, have a good day. And that was it. So, and then after that point, I just sort of like forgot about it, It became a nice little anecdote that I could tell the people at parties. Oh yeah, I was on a TV show. Wasn't until Facebook came along that I sort of understood that, wow, okay, this thing is still going on. So yeah.
And that sort of answered my next question. Actually, was what was the point that you realised, or when was the point, should I say, that you realised that the show was almost something bigger as such?
Like around 2011, I think, because when I was out there in 92 and 93, and understanding how the kids' television programming was still very similar to what it was when I was growing up. You would have these different shows that would come on Saturday morning cartoons, and they would be there one year and then gone the next. So my whole thinking about Power Rangers was that it was something that was very cool. It would last about a year, and then it would be over and done with. Of course, I didn't have all of the information. I didn't see anything that was going on behind the scenes. I had no idea that they had warehouses full of toys ready to go. And I think that was one of the magical elements to that lightning in a bottle thing that made the show so successful, because the moment the show went on the air, the toys were already on the shelves. Kids could watch the show, go into the store, and they have it in the can. So it was real for them. It was tactile, something they could actually touch. And I think that, led to like this huge giant explosion of Power Rangers all the time. I'm sure parents got tired of hearing Kias and Kias. Want to be a Red Ranger, want to be a Black Ranger, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just in your face. You could not escape it for like that first year or whatever. And I remember being on the East Coast Christmas time of 1993 and walking by a KB toy store, and there was just like a mob of people clamoring for these Power Ranger toys. And that was the first time that I saw the Power Dormer toy that had my face on it. It was like, my face is on a toy, and I'll never see a penny of that. So, it was pretty wild. But then, because I got caught up in doing other things and living my life, it just sort of fell off my radar. I wasn't paying any attention to it. So, yeah.
I was going to say, you mentioned there you were doing other things. When looking at things that you have done, you have diverted into a few different voiceover things like games and things like that you've also done, but it still keeps cropping up here and there that you do some Power Rangers voiceover stuff still now, like, might be for something, not involved necessarily with the main show, but there's still bits and pieces that you still get asked to do.
The last time that I was asked to do the voice professionally was for the Battle for the Grid video game. Kyle Higgins, who was the author of the Boom Studios Power Ranger comics, they did the Shattered Grid storyline, and they worked that into the video game storyline. So they brought us all out, or they brought a few of us out to do voices for those characters. So that was the last time that I was sort of professionally asked to do the character voice and got paid for it. So,
well, that leads me to another question, because I was saying to Matt earlier today, I'd read an article, and I can't find it for the life of me, about a show that Netflix are looking to pick up, and whoever it is that are dealing with the show, producing it wise, are going to turn it into an animated version of it could be something like The Matrix, or it could be, I know there's a Jurassic Park animated show now on Netflix. If there was to ever be an animated version of the Power Rangers, would that be of interest to you? Do you think that'd be something you'd want to get involved in?
Of course. I mean, I like Power Rangers. I like the concept of Power Rangers, and I like the fan base because they're so passionate about it.
Yeah.
And be able to recreate the character in a new medium that might be able to explore other things that the television show couldn't get at.
Yeah.
The technology of the time, because of the rapid production schedule and so forth and so on. I'd love to be a part of that. I would hope that it would be a different contract negotiation kind of situation where, we would get adequately compensated for that kind of thing. But I would jump at that in a heartbeat. Yeah, of course. Because this is the very interesting thing. I want to make sure that everybody understands this, that I did the voice of the character. It's my face throughout the life of the character, all the way up through Countdown to Destruction in Power Rangers in Space. That's my. But I only did the voice of the character for 31 episodes. After that, a man by the name of Robert Manahan took over the voice. And so when I think a lot of people think about Zordon, the voice that's in their head might be Robert's and not exactly mine. And I used to get this question a lot in early conventions about why was Zordon at the beginning? Why did he sound British? And I wasn't aware that I was doing a British accent because I was stage trained. Because my mother is English, she's from over there. I lived over there for a while. I started school when I was 4 over there. But when I came back to the States and grew up in going to school in the States, and then started to do stage acting and going to college for acting, we had to learn elocution. We had to learn the proper way to pitch and speak to a wide group. So the accent that I was using for Zordon at the beginning of the show was what they call a mid-Atlantic accent. It's very clipped, it's very clear, so that you can understand the words. You can hit the back wall, as they used to say, with the voice. So that was the sort of tinge to the voice that people might sometimes mistake for British. And Robert did a really good job at trying to match my tone and cadence and stuff, but you can tell there's a very definite switch between episode 31 and episode 32. Why does Zordon suddenly sound not quite the same? But Robert did an amazing job. He did most of the vocal work for Zordon. So yeah.
Whereabouts in the UK did you grow up, or at least go to school in?
My mother is from East Anglia. She grew up near Ipswich. And when my father was in the Air Force, so we lived in Southampton, and I believe I went to school in.
Okay. Well, we're in East Anglia. We're in Norfolk, which is obviously just north of Ipswich. So small world.
You can go to Albury to get fish and chips. So yeah.
I love Albury. Yeah, it's nice.
And see your Flash Gordon t-shirt, Guardians of the Galaxy hat. Sci-fi is clearly, and from your writing, and Marvel t-shirt James got, sci-fi or sort of that sort of related culture is obviously part of your life external to sort of Power Rangers. What was your experience of that on the sort of programs or movies you enjoyed in that sort of genre previously?
I cannot remember a time when comic books, superheroes, science fiction wasn't a part of my life. When I lived in England, when I was going to school at the age of 4, I have this distinct memory of going to see Santa Claus at some local shopping center. But in order to get to Santa Claus, we had to go in through the TARDIS. We had to enter into this big blue police box and go through like this little space vortex in order to see Santa Claus. And so I grew up with Doctor Who, I grew up with UFO, I grew up with the Marvel cartoons on television, the Super Friends. I read Marvel comics and Batman and Superman, and from the age of like 5 on, anytime I could consume some sort of science fiction book, movie, or TV show, I was just devouring all that stuff. I mean, I grew up with King Kong versus Godzilla, Ultraman, Speed Racer, Marine Boy, all this sort of early anime stuff, and all the kaiju and manga, and Planet of the Apes was huge for me. I loved Planet of the Apes. And in the 70s, when Marvel started to appear in its early incarnations on TV shows like Spider-Man and the Hulk with Lou Ferrigno, and all of those early attempts to sort of bring that stuff to life, and never really quite getting there with it.
But they were so great. I remember watching those Incredible Hulks.
Oh yeah,
you could see it was a wig. You could see, you know, he was painted, but it was cool. It was still really cool.
I
Yeah.
mean, Lou Ferrigno was something that was really sort of great because Lou was so huge at the time. I mean, just physically massive. And you could imagine, you know, he could actually lift a car up, you know, and
he was a Hulk. Yeah.
It didn't look CGI. It didn't look fake. It was like, here's a real guy lifting a car. And so, yeah, he was awesome. And that scene at near the end of the opening credits where Bill Bixby would rear back and then they would match half his face with Lou's face, that was just fantastic. I loved it. And all of that, you know, has been stewing in me for like the last 40 years. And, you know, in one way or another, it's coming out in what I'm interested in writing and exploring and stuff today. So, yeah.
Based on all them shows that you just mentioned, does it just blow your mind when you see what's coming out, you know, over the last kind of, especially with the MCU and things like that? I mean, the DC stuff kind of hasn't been as popular, I would say, depending on what side of the fence you sit, if you do. But, I mean, you must be amazed by some of the stuff that they do now. Yeah,
I mean, you know, starting around 2010, I started to get like this real sense of satisfaction, this real sense of I was justified. You know? Because when I was growing up, it was like, oh, put that down, that'll rot your brain. Why are you reading it? It's for kids, you know, and that sort of thing. But here it is. It's a tent pole of our entertainment that you know we have today, and what's great about those stories is that those characters and those stories, they allow us to explore things that then might become reality in the real world. I mean, I think back to Dick Tracy and to Star Trek, and those guys had devices where you could see somebody's face in your hand, and now we have that.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I told my dad the other day, my dad and I were driving, and because of his dashboard, he was able to answer a text, or he was able to get a text and then answer it just by pushing a button on his dashboard. And I said, we live in the future. So,
yeah, it's true.
It's really amazing.
Question mark. Hi gents, thank you for having me back on. My question is to do with Comic-Con. Now, Matt, I don't know if you've been to one, and if you have, what did you think of it? And if not, why not? James, we have both been to the London Comic-Con, so I don't know, James can talk about his experience there. And I'm pretty sure your guest has probably been to loads of Comic-Cons, so, you know, I'd be really interested to know what their experience is. Thank you very much. Cheers.
What is your kind of overall experience of Comic-Cons? Because I know the fans, I mean, when I see some of the footage, like, and not even, sorry, I'm going back over this, but yourself and all the other previous members of the original Power Rangers, which I think of as the, you know, the ones that started it off, you all still kind of relate back to it. You know, the Red Ranger is still the Red Ranger, you're still Zordon, and so forth. You know, it's still that kind of, they might have gone on to do other things,
right?
But it's still that kind of almost signifies who they are. So fans, and is that because of the fan base that you have?
I think that's part of it. I don't know what it is about the Power Rangers casting process. I don't know if they have something that they drop into the water that they give you before you audition or whatever. But every single person that I've met that was a part of Power Rangers, no matter what season they're in, they're really terrific people.
Yeah.
And I think they're all aware of the impact that they have for the people that show up to these Comic-Cons. So it's a way for us to sort of give back, because we hear a lot of times, we hear the same phrases over and over, like, thank you very much for my childhood. And my response to that is, oh, thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. Because we're a lot more alike than we are different. And I think that gets lost a lot these days, in the fact that we spend so much time focusing on what makes us different from everybody else that we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the stuff that makes us closer together, that connects us. And every time that we do a Q&A at a Power Rangers convention or at a pop culture convention where we do a Q&A session, we're reminded all the time about what the show means to other people. Because I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories about people who would come home after school to an empty house because both of their parents were working, or because their family was going through a tough time, and the only thing that they had to relate to, the only little moment of joy that they had, was that little half hour of television where these kids in bright red and blue and pink, they jumped around and did all these great things, and it made them excited about stuff. And so it's very humbling, and I try to honor that as much as possible by thanking the people for watching it, because without you guys, we wouldn't be here. I would just be sitting in my house trying to write my books, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd be off working on some sort of oil rig, losing a finger here and there or whatever. But it's very, like I said, a lot of luck, and being in the right place at the right time allowed me to sort of have this delayed journey where I get to connect with people that I may not have ever got a chance to meet with, and listen to their stories, and to thank them for allowing me to be a part of their story. So that's my whole thing. So
have you got a favorite Comic-Con or event like that you've ever been to?
Oh gosh. We were in Ireland for a week, and that was awesome. I also got to go to any place outside of the United States is very exciting for me. So going to Jakarta or going to Mexico or going to Peru, those are the kind of things that stand out for me, because I get to see a different part of the world. I get to see different cultures, experience what their food is like, and again, seeing the same similarities as the people that live across the street from me, about what they like, what they don't like, what their hopes are, and how all of us are just trying to make it through this crazy thing called life. And those are the things that are kind of my favorite. So
I've only been to one Comic-Con, which was in London with Mark, and this was only probably 3 or 4 years ago, and we all dressed up, we all got outfits, and I went as Superman. And the one thing that sticks out for me is this mum coming over to me with her little boy, and she said, "Can my son have a picture with you?" And I'm nobody, but because he looked at me and thought I was Superman, it was amazing, and I'm taking a picture with some random kid, and it was incredible. And that's kind of, like you say, like for the child in their eyes,
right? And
it's all real.
Not to get too philosophical about the whole thing, but it's not about me, it's about them.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. I mean, I've taken thousands of pictures with people that I may never ever see again, but for them, that holds some kind of significance, and that's really great. That's awesome.
Yeah. How about you, Matt?
I've never been to an actual, well, actually it's too light. I was going to say I've never actually been to a Comic-Con, but I have, because I've been to the, in Norfolk here, in Norwich, they do a sort of one every year. So I've been to that, Norcon, which is a much smaller scale thing. But the closest to a large sort of Comic-Con is Celebration Europe, which is a Star Wars specific one. So I went to that in 2007. That was the first proper sort of thing of that type that I went to, and it was incredible just seeing. You're walking along and there's R2D2. He's just, sort of going past, and
it's the effort that everyone else goes to.
And just being immersed in it. And all of a sudden, just Darth Vader and the stormtroopers walk past. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And that was a really positive experience. I think going though that was probably in the lull between the Star Wars films. So it was all the the diehard fans there, I would say, that absolutely love it passionately. And then sort of going in 2017, I think was the last one they did. It was very, very commercial is the way I would describe it. And it was just so many stalls, so packed in, just everything had a significantly higher price than the last time I went. And it was all about going and buying stuff rather than actually
the experience,
having that experience of all the like-minded people together, which I thought was a bit of a shame, really. So yeah.
Unfortunately, Comic-Cons are a consumerist kind of event. I mean, it's all about you know, acquiring merchandise and that sort of thing. And I guess that's sort of like the downside of Comic-Con. But for me, Comic-Cons is watching all the connections of people who are getting together and all the guys who are dressed like Thor joining the genre. Hey, you look like Thor,
It's amazing.
That's always the fun stuff. But I mean, it's also very surreal for me because I find myself sort of rubbing shoulders with people that I admired when I was growing up. Getting to meet Sam Jones from Flash Gordon was sort of my jaw on the floor, can't really talk to you kind of big moment. And now that I've been to a number of conventions and Sam knows me by name, it still blows my mind that this little thing that I did one day almost 30 years ago has put me into certain circles where I get to look at the world through a different lens for a little bit of a time and try to understand what that means. And having conversations and going to dinner with Paul Freeman, who was Ivan Ooze in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, but for me is always going to be Renee Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So for me to sit there with this guy who traded jabs with Indiana Jones, I was like, oh man, this is really surreal. But it's also really, really cool to know that, Paul is just like a regular guy like me, and we laughed about things and joked about things, and you really dial down into what is the human element of things.
Yeah.
I'm still mad at Austin and Karen for going to Salt Lake Comic-Con and getting to meet Chris Evans and Anthony Mackie while they left me at home and I wasn't there for that. So, it's just very interesting and very surreal to know that you're a part of that. So yeah.
Is that Karen Ashley that you mentioned there?
Yeah, Karen.
So because again, I was reading into this. I don't know what stage you're at with. Is it the order?
Well, as far as I know, Karen is still working really hard on getting that. I'm not sure if it's called the order anymore or if it's changed. But she is, for the last year, like everybody else, she's been on lockdown at home there in California, and so has been pouring like every moment of her time into trying to get into meetings with people to try to get that project out there and working for people, because we did run into a couple of snags. We were all out there ready to film, and then the union stepped in and shut it down, and we were all very, very upset and depressed about that. But Karen, went back into it, got all of her I's dotted and T's crossed, and got it back up and running. It just takes a long time to get back into that position. It's out there.
But it's an incredible story, because you mentioned a bit earlier about you're not sure what it was about the cast of the Power Rangers, the not just the first one, but a few on from there, and this film that's being made is what, 15 members of Power Rangers, something like that?
That was the original thrust of it, right? Because Karen had been doing conventions for a long time. Austin and I started doing them in 2014. He started like 6 months before I did. And so all during this time, all the Rangers that would go to conventions kept getting asked the same question: when are we going to see you all together? When are you going to do a project together? When are you going to be back on Power Rangers and that sort of thing? And so Karen really wanted to put something together was tired of waiting on the big wigs to call people back for reunions or whatever. She said, well, let's do something ourselves. Let's put something together. And so she had talked to Austin and a couple of people, and Austin said, you should talk to Dave. Dave's a writer. And so Karen emailed me, and we emailed back and forth for a while, and then we started writing together. We had this really organic, fun writing experience, because I would write a little something and I would send it to her, and she would like, that's great. And then she would expound on it. And so we had this really great working relationship as far as like writing and putting it together. And within a month, we had the first draft of a script that we were sort of very shy and protective of. Mm-hmm. And Karen had, because we would sit there and have conversations about, well, what's our fan casting? Who's going to play this part? Who's going to play that part? And Karen's original idea was that she wanted to bring, her friends into it, these Rangers that she had met at conventions and gone, because a lot of us didn't work with some of these other actors in these other seasons. We knew each other because we saw each other at these shows and stuff, but we never worked together. And so when we finally got the script in a shape where we thought it was okay that we might show it to somebody, because a lot of these Rangers have been given scripts by other people. Other people have brought them projects that never really got off the ground. Either the money fell through or the scripts were not really well written or whatever. So everybody was a little gun shy as far as like, here's a project for you guys, and be like, oh, okay. So we were a little wary. We were a little bit timid about showing it, but Karen invited a bunch of people over to Nakia Barus's house and didn't really tell them what it was about, mm-hmm. and didn't really tell them who was going to be there. So when they showed up, and Jason Font was there, and Yoshi Sodarsa was there, and Catherine Sutherland was there, they were like, well, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And then Karen presented them the idea to them, and their eyes lit up and they got very excited about it. And then we said, okay, here's the script, take it, read it, come back, let us know in 24 hours what you think. And it wasn't even 24 hours. Within an hour, 2 hours, we were getting phone calls from people saying, I'm in, I love it, I want to do this, let's get it off the ground. And then we all went out to LA and we shot the little teaser for the Kickstarter, and that was really an amazing experience to see something that I had put down on paper get brought to life. And I just remember sort of having this Guinness World Book of Records kind of moment when we had a warehouse floor with 15 Power Rangers who were fighting each other, and I was like, no, I've never seen that before. And, so that was very exciting. And then of course we hit the snag, and the bottom of it kind of fell out, so we were really bummed about that. But hopefully somebody will see what Karen has, will understand the potential of it, and bring it to life. So yeah, that would be nice.
And what about, you've mentioned there you're writing, is there more things that you're looking to do, or that you're currently doing? I know you've got a few books and things like that.
Yeah, I'm currently in the middle of writing my third Lincoln Bright novel. The first book, Glims, is already out. The second one, Gaunts, will be out in the next couple of months. And I'm really immersed in that right now. That's sort of where my head is at. Mm-hmm. And that's where all of my focus and energy is going right now. I worked on my own pitch deck for that I've been, tweaking with my publisher and stuff. So, of course, the goal would be able to turn it into a TV series. I mean, everybody has that sort of aspiration, but I have the chance to do something that I love to do, which is very rare in the world today. So I'm trying to take as much advantage of that as I can. So
yeah. And when your first book was published, was that another, you mentioned like almost the pinch me moment with talking about the order, when you had all them 15 Power Rangers there, when you had that physical copy of a book? Because we've had people who, I've got a copy of it somewhere, who have made their own comic books.
Yeah.
And they said it's not until you have that physical copy of that published comic book and you look at it and you go, wow, I've got it. Was that one of them moments for you with your book?
Yeah, I mean, I did have that moment, you know, when the box showed up and there were like multiple copies of it. I was like, oh, it's really cool. I had self-published one of my own books, so I had gotten that in the mail. But anytime that you have a book that has your name in it, that has the words that you wrote in it, and you can actually physically hold it, that's a very unique experience. I still haven't got my hardcover. When I get the hardcover version of it, then I'll be like, oh, this is pretty exciting. But the publishing world is not the same as it was when I was growing up because of the internet and self-publishing and stuff like that. So when I was growing up, it used to be there was like, I don't know, maybe, 5 or 6 or 7,000 books published a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And now it's somewhere up in the number of like 250,000 books a year are published. So how do you stand out in that sea of titles and book covers, and you know, everybody is fighting for the same piece of the pie, and it some days can be very frustrating.
It's the same for me and Matt in the podcast world. There's so many podcasts now, but we've kind of just come to, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is having that kind of achievement of knowing you've done something. And it's the same for us with this. I mean, we get to speak to people that we admire.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think everybody can identify with. It's like when I went to that studio warehouse in North Hollywood in 1993, and they shaved all my hair off and they slathered me the green paint, I had no idea how far that would ripple outwards and how many different people that would touch. And so what you guys are doing, it's going to touch somebody. Somebody's going to hear it, somebody's going to listen to it, and they're going to get a spark of inspiration, and that's going to lead to another ripple. And that's the really amazing thing, right? Is we all touch each other, we just don't really see the after effect of that all the time.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
What I mentioned at the very top about being very opinionated about some stuff, I mean, I think there are some people out there who are putting out a lot of negative ripples, and they're doing more harm than they realize. And I always try to mitigate that as best as I can by trying to say more positive things and to try to counter all the negativity, because it's so easy to be negative these days. The headlines and the news programs are just filled with horrible stories about why you should be afraid and all this other kind of stuff. And if we could take all of that back and say, okay, well, we know all of that stuff. We know that there's bad stuff. Let's focus on the good stuff. Yeah. But for whatever reason, the human race just really loves to undermine themselves as much as possible. So unfortunately, we don't really live long enough to learn the lessons that our grandfathers learned. We're learning the same lessons over and over. But hopefully one of these days we'll get outside that bubble and things will be better for other people later on. So
it's the age of social media as well, isn't it? I don't think that helps. I think there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there that
I wish we would have had this back in 1993. I could have had a better career.
But that's the thing. There's the positive side of it as well, that we can reach out to people that, you know, and on the off chance they might read it and they might respond and say, yes, I'll come on your show.
Exactly.
I've got one last question, David, and we'll bring it back round full circle. As you are the mentor of the Power Rangers, if you could pick which Power Ranger me and Matt would be, which would we be?
Well, this is going to sound really cheesy, and it's going to sound like I'm dodging the question.
It's fine.
Zordon didn't choose any of the Rangers. The morphing grid chooses the Rangers, right? Zordon is the one who just mentors them in their journey. So it's not up to Zordon who gets assigned what color or what Zord or whatever. He's just trying, to encourage them to be the best that they can be, whether they're driving a Triceratops or riding in a Tyrannosaurus Rex or, flying the pterodactyl, it's what you do with it, not what's assigned with you to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to be the Red Ranger, you're the Red Ranger. If you want to be the Blue Ranger, you're the Blue Ranger.
Basically, Matt's going to be the Pink Ranger. So,
Yes.
So we've agreed on that. So, well, David, where can our listeners and our viewers find you on social media?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at David J. Fielding. I'm on Instagram at DJFielding_Zordon. And if you search Facebook for Zordon, you should find my Zordon page. So.
Well, we will put the links to all of them in the description. But once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Very happy to be here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Don't forget, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching and listening on, because then that way you won't miss out on any future episodes we put out.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and give us a follow, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes and posts that we put out there. But thank you for listening and watching.
And we'll see you next episode.